Hello my friend, in today's video we will take a look at 5 lens kit that I use with Sony A7III, A7C and A7S III. This is basically a result of my E-mount lens testing on this channel over the past 3.5 years. Before we get into the video, I have to say that unlike most videos on this channel, this video will be a lot about my personal preferences and opinions. Let's start with wide-angle lenses. Ultra-wide zooms are in my opinion the weakest part of Sony E-mount lens selection. 16 to 35mm GM is a great lens of course, but I don't need f2.8 on ultra-wide zoom and frankly, I don't want to carry it around. I have also had the Tamron 17 to 28mm f2.8, but it doesn't provide that much flexibility. That is why I went the other way and I got 2 primes instead of wide zoom. Sony FE 20mm f1.8G and 24mm f1.4 GM are easily 2 of my most favorite lenses of all time. These 2 are great examples of modern, almost no compromise lens design. First of all, both are tiny for what they can do. 20mm f1.8 is 85.7mm long and it weighs just 373 grams. 24mm GM is 92.4mm long and it weighs 445 grams, which is super light for 24mm f1.4. The sharpness of both with 24mm sensor is perfect, and I mean that quite literally. With 24MP sensor, both are extremely sharp right from wide open aperture across the frame. You will only be able to see tiny improvements from wide open to f2.8 in the corners. You can use these lenses anywhere from wide open to f11 without any worries about the sharpness. The build quality is also identical. Both are made of high quality plastics with some metal parts and they have rubberized rings. Despite the size, both have full controls including aperture ring, a FMF switch, custom button, and even aperture declicking mechanism. Both also share the only weakness, which is the focus breathing. That is quite noticeable, although I don't think that it matters that much on wide-angle lenses. The main difference is simply the focal length. 24mm is more versatile focal length. It is already more interesting than 26 or 28, but it is still usable for all-round use, such as walk-around travel photography. I like to use it for landscapes, cityscapes, and also for hands-on product shots with shallow depth of field. 20mm provides significantly more dramatic field of view. It isn't extremely wide by today's standards, so it doesn't put that much emphasis on the foreground as 16mm for example. I also use it for cities and landscapes. It is also my favorite focal length for gimbal use. This angle puts more emphasis on the foreground movement, it is quite immersive and also easy to stabilize. That lightweight is also very handy for gimbal use. I have this 20mm f1.8 attached on my A7C probably 90% of the time. This is one of my most favorite lens and camera combinations ever. The main reason why I chose these 2 over a zoom is the optical character. Especially the 24 just shoots beautiful pictures, it has excellent micro contrast and in my opinion the best bokeh of all wide-angle lenses. 20mm is also excellent in this regard and I think that it could have easily been a G Master. The third lens in my kit is Sigma 24 to 70mm f2.8 DGDN. This is simply a very good standard zoom. 24 to 70mm is the classic versatile focal range, suitable for everything from landscapes to portraits, so there is no need to talk about that. Out of the zoom trinity, I use 24 to 70 the most, so here I want and need that f2.8 aperture. Optically it is again excellent. On a 24MP sensor, it is very sharp at any focal length right at f2.8. There is actually no visible increase in sharpness if you stop it down, because it can render 24MP right from f2.8 even in the corners. I can basically give it a perfect sharpness score, again with a 24MP sensor. The optical character is also very nice. It has plenty of contrast and accurate color rendition. The bokeh is also the best that I've seen on a standard zoom, together with a Panasonic S Pro counterpart. It does rely on profile corrections, but it is so sharp that it doesn't even affect the corners. It is 125mm long and it weighs 830 grams, which is adequate for 24 to 70mm f2.8. The build quality is excellent, just like with other Sigma art lenses. Sigma was also able to get the autofocus algorithm right, and I can say that the focusing is just as good as with the latest Sony lenses. The only thing that I can complain about is that some dust may get underneath the front element. I have solved that by using a UV filter. I don't really have any other complaints, so that is a perfectly acceptable solution for me. The fourth lens in my kit is Sony FE 90mm f2.8 macro GOSS. This is a very special lens. I use this one mostly for product photography and macro. I only shoot about 2 portraits per year, so when I have to shoot some portraits, I also use this lens for that. I occasionally use it for telephoto landscapes and cityscapes if I want the best possible image quality. 90mm macro is one of the sharpest lenses ever made. Testing it with a 24MP sensor is rather pointless. It is perfect across the frame right from f2.8. I also mean that literally. Even f16 is perfectly usable. The diffraction is only visible at f22. The contrast is outstanding and there is basically no visible chromatic aberration. Basically, in every shot taken with this lens, you can simply see that this is pure optical greatness. Another special characteristic of this lens is the bokeh. It is not an f1.4, but at 90mm on the full frame, you can get very pronounced subject separation even at f2.8. The rendition of the bokeh and also the transitions are extremely smooth. Even with busy backgrounds, you won't really get harsh outlines. It is a real macro lens, so it provides 1:1 or 100% magnification. I use that mostly for wristwatches, flowers, and for details on cameras and other electronic devices. The sharpness and all other optical qualities are just as good as when focused to infinity. In terms of the build quality, it is very good. The lens is fully metal, it has fantastic focusing ring with hard stops and full controls. It is weather sealed, but it doesn't have a gasket around the mount, which is my only complaint with this lens. Another nice feature is the stabilization. That is extremely important when shooting handheld close-up images. The autofocus is a bit slower than with the latest Sony lenses, but it is still fine for everything except tracking of fast-moving subjects. Overall, I am extremely happy with this lens and I use it as much as I can. It is easily one of my top 3 most favorite lenses of all time. The last lens in my kit is Sony FE 70-200mm f4 GOSS. Just like with the ultra-wide lenses, I don't need f2.8 on short to mid telephoto and I don't want to carry it. Unlike with the 16-35, Sony fortunately offers a very solid 70-200 f4. Optically it is just a little bit behind the other 4 lenses, but I can still say that it is a very good lens. You may need to stop it down to f5.6 if you need full sharpness in the corners, but that's about it. The contrast is also very solid and the bokeh is quite nice. The subject separation at f4 is also sufficient for me, especially around 200mm. I mostly use 70-200 for getting a different perspective when shooting landscapes and cities. 70-200 is out of the range of the smartphones, so I think that this kind of telephoto shots have a bit more distinctive look to them. In terms of the build quality, I don't really have any complaints. It is made of high quality plastics and it has some metal parts. It also has complete controls, including AF/MF switch, stabilization controls, and custom buttons. It is an internal zoom lens, which is good for weather sealing and dust protection. It weighs 840 grams and it is 175mm long, which is adequate for this type of lens. The most frequently asked question that I'm getting about this lens is why did I buy it over Tamron 70 to 180mm f2.8? The answer is the stabilization. The lack of stabilization on a telephoto zoom is an instant deal breaker for me. 70 to 200 f4 has very effective stabilization, which works very well together with IBIS in Sony cameras, so I'm happy with that. Three things that I don't like about this lens is that there is no gasket around the mount, the minimum focusing distance is not that great, and it is not possible to use it with a teleconverter. Despite that, it is the best compromise for me out of the E-mount options. So these were my 5 lenses that I currently use with full frame E-mount cameras. I am currently considering getting 3 more lenses. Those are Sony FE 35mm f1.4 GM, newly announced 40mm f2.5, and Sony FE 200 to 600mm f5.6 to 6.3. If some of you would be interested in videos about these lenses, let me know in the comments. Despite that this video was more about my personal preferences, I hope that it was somehow useful and maybe you have learned something new. So that's it for today, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section and see you next time.